Pomej. The Suspicious Vice President. Sherlock Holmes. The Galactic Cases. Episode 13. Based on the characters by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. A Go Audio production. Once again, Captain Decker had received a special assignment which he was keen to delegate to Sherlock Holmes. Therefore, he visited him in his comfortable guest suite and got straight to the point. Our Vice President, Averell Quinn, is currently on his honeymoon, which has already become somewhat too extended. Apparently, his love for his bride has left him rather confused. Men are like matches. They ignite easily and lose their heads, joked Holmes, who was in the midst of a chess match with the robot Elmer. What are matches? Asked Elmer, who was unfamiliar with such an ancient fire-making implement. For demonstration purposes, Holmes retrieved some from his trouser pocket and explained. One can use these to light tobacco in a pipe. Yes, but you needn't light one specifically now, Decker advised him. I don't like seeing that aboard my spaceship. Besides, I wanted to ask you to bring the Vice President to his senses and prompt his swift return home. He's currently in the TRAPPIST system, 40 light-years from Earth, on TRAPPIST-1e. I recall having been on the neighbouring planet TRAPPIST-1g before, Holmes said cheerfully. That's where I need to return for a minor repair, Decker admitted to him. And you'll be so kind as to persuade Vice President Quinn to return to work in the meantime. Elmer will take you and Dr. Watson, who will surely be glad to accompany you, there in the space glider. Being the adventurous Englishmen they were, they agreed and set off on the journey with the robot. It was already dark when the space glider landed on TRAPPIST-1e. Here we are, Elmer noted, pointing through a porthole. From here you can see the brightly lit villa where the Governor, Mr. William Wellington, resides. He can inform you of the Vice President's whereabouts. Should you require my assistance, you can summon me with this smart bracelet. Additionally, it has an unlimited payment function when you press here, you see, Mr. Holmes? Nodding contentedly, the master detective placed the proffered technical piece of jewellery around his right wrist. Most practical. We shall cover the distance on foot. Agreed, Watson? Yes, a refreshing walk will do us good, the doctor agreed. It is always exciting to land on a foreign world. Indeed it is, confirmed Holmes. I no longer need any morphine to combat boredom. Ha! And with the unlimited payment function, we could buy half the planet, Dr. Watson joked. On the horizon, two of the neighbouring planets loomed large, almost like enormous moons. The temperature felt spring-like at nearly 25 degrees Celsius. On the road leading to the villa, they encountered no pedestrians. Only the occasional inactive stainless steel robot stood about. At the garden gate, they had to announce their visit to one of the steel companions, whereupon the ornate lattice gate opened and they strolled through a well-maintained garden into the governor's house, where they politely introduced themselves to a corpulent man in a royal blue frock coat with a red sash. And I am supposed to persuade the Vice President, Mr. Wellington, to gradually return from his honeymoon to his high office, Holmes announced to him, not without pride. Persuasion is good, the governor said with amusement. Well, you'll see for yourself soon enough. At least I now know that the secrecy is working quite well. It may be rather late, Holmes remarked, but perhaps the Vice President is still awake, in which case we could straight away… Wellington interrupted him. I am quite certain he is still awake. You only need to travel a short distance to reach him. My house robot will lead you there. Moby, take these gentlemen to MX Block 21. The robot, in the form of a 5-foot-tall teddy bear, rolled leisurely ahead of them from the imposing governor's mansion, across a wide street, towards a gloomy rectangular building that exuded the austere charm of a barracks. Phew, this building almost looks like a prison to me, Dr. Watson observed. But I suppose it's a secure fortress that provides maximum security for the Vice President. I rather fear you are mistaken, my dear friend. Holmes anticipated what awaited them. A wide, metre-high metal gate opened with a grinding sound, similar to a vault door. Behind it, the late visitor's gaze fell upon a dimly lit courtyard. Upon entering, one could see bare walls through which only a single narrow door granted access. Behind it stood a robot dressed as a knight. "Whom do you wish to visit?" he asked in a tinny voice. "The Vice President of the Galactic Union," replied Holmes, whilst checking his tie was properly adjusted. "Along the corridor to the door with number 587-298. He directed them with an outstretched arm, whereupon they made their way past numerous doors with different numbers on door plates. The corridor seemed endless, but finally they reached the specified door. "This really does seem to be a prison," whispered Dr. Watson, perplexed, as he automatically grasped at his shirt collar, which appeared to have become too tight in these dreary surroundings. "Yes, it seems that way to me too, and the Vice President appears to be in serious trouble," Holmes whispered back and knocked on the door, which then opened automatically. A musty smell hit them as they entered, and in the pale light they made out a slim man in his mid-40s, whose pallid face stared at them questioningly. "Good evening, dear Mr. Quinn. I am—" Holmes was about to introduce himself, but was immediately interrupted by the man. "Ah, finally someone comes to see me. Just look how I, the Vice President of the Union, must live here. This furniture, dreadful, a panopticon of crumbling horrors, the legacy of an era long past its prime, taking away my space and air to breathe. My window is far too small, and what's more, it's barred and only shows a view of the neighbouring planets. And anyway," Quinn ranted in an endless litany, wearing an orange overall with the number 587-298 emblazoned on his chest. As he spoke, he paced back and forth, repeatedly running his splayed fingers through his cropped sandy blonde hair and occasionally clapping his hands together in a gesture of despair. As he continued complaining, Holmes surveyed the furnishings. For a prison cell, he found it quite well appointed. In one corner stood a large wooden bed with black and white checkered bedding. In the middle were 4 chairs around a table, and on one wall there was even a flat-screen television, which was currently showing the eruptions of the central star, a red dwarf. "We are truly very sorry for you, Mr. Quinn." Holmes stopped his flow of speech and quickly introduced himself and the doctor. "Oh yes, I talk and talk, when I really must offer you something to drink at the very least," Quinn suddenly remembered and snapped his fingers. "Servant!" A dark-haired servant appeared shortly after his exclamation. She appeared to be about 25 years old and wore the colourful costume of a harem lady. A golden belly chain hung 10 centimetres above the waistband of her low-slung harem trousers. Quinn cheekily grabbed the chain with his right hand, letting his index finger slide beneath it across her bare stomach, and asked innocently, "What beautiful jewellery! Is it real gold?" It was crystal clear that he only did this to be able to touch her. "No, it's just costume jewellery," she replied, visibly annoyed. "What would you like? Number 587-298? "But I told you to call me Averell, or Avi, like all my female friends and male friends," he implored her, and reluctantly withdrew his hand. "I regret, but I must adhere to the regulations." She waited for his order with her eyes rolled upwards. "I would like a cold beer, non-alcoholic of course, and for the gentleman. He looked expectantly from Holmes to Dr. Watson and back again. "A beer wouldn't be bad for us either," suggested the doctor, whereupon Holmes nodded approvingly. Without a word, the servant left the cell again. "At least the service works," rejoiced the Vice President and offered his guests a seat. "Do sit with me at the table. The television set from the century before last is my only luxury here. Only the programming leaves much to be desired. They mostly show courtroom dramas, like 12 Angry Men, which was still broadcast in black and white. It's a sort of additional punishment, yet I am completely innocent. He had practically roared the last word. With his elbows propped on the table and his face buried in his hands, he made a pitiful impression. The servant returned with a tray bearing 3 full beer steins and served each person a tankard that was primarily filled with white foam. The beer is probably from the Munich Oktoberfest 2038, am I right? Quinn sneered, but received no answer from her and continued with his sermon after the servant had left. Besides being completely innocent, I also hold the second highest office in the Union and should therefore be sacrosanct. What happened then? Dr. Watson finally wanted to know. Well, it happened that I had a drink in the hotel bar late at night. I can't quite remember what it was, but the drink must have been spiked with drugs or some sort of sedative, and I fell asleep, and then, for reasons unknown to me, I woke up next to a male corpse. You can surely imagine my shock. If at least the corpse had been female, women are more pleasing to look at than men, even when dead. But like this... Quinn greedily drank from the tankard. Ah! I see, said Holmes, who had merely sipped at his tankard. So you suspect that someone has set you up? Set up is far too euphemistic a way of putting it. I was duped, deceived, subjected to a perfidious intrigue. It's clearly a criminal orchestration. Oh, I'm at a loss for words to speak about this nightmare come true, he exclaimed with expansive gestures. Well, I find you rather talkative for someone at a loss for words, Mr. Quinn, Holmes remarked with his dry humour. Do you know what I find peculiar, Mr. Quinn? Dr. Watson chimed in. You haven't asked about your wife at all. As a newly wedded husband, one would typically be concerned about one's better half. I'm not worried about my wife at all. She isn't the one innocently locked away in a dungeon. I reckon she's having a splendid time at the hotel, enjoying spa treatments and entertainment from costumed performers. The whole planet is teeming with costumed creatures, and one can never be quite certain whether they're human beings, cyborgs, or robots. But naturally, I miss my wife, particularly at this time of day. We shall pay her a visit as well, Holmes announced to him. But first, please tell us what happened after they found you next to the dead man, Mr. Quinn. That's the limit, he exclaimed angrily, slamming his fist on the table. I had barely come to my senses, realizing I was in quite a precarious situation, when some madman burst in and screamed at the top of his lungs, "The Vice President has committed murder," and I shouted back, "Shut your mouth! I forbid such unfounded accusations. I'll sue anyone who claims this. The presumption of innocence applies." Holmes briefly stuck a finger in his ear to demonstrate that the Vice President had become a bit too loud, before casually remarking, "Most terribly unpleasant for you." "Yes, one could certainly say that," Quinn pressed out between his now pursed lips. "In short, I'll tell you quite honestly, should I be wrongfully convicted here, I expect a rescue operation from our Space Force." Dr. Watson and Sherlock Holmes exchanged a meaningful look, remained silent, and stood up. "I can imagine the last statement leads you to suspect that I was the perpetrator, but I swear on my beloved wife's life that it was not me," he declared, rather like an actor who was slightly overdoing it. "Then I shall take on the matter and find out who played this nasty trick on you, Mr. Quinn," promised Holmes, who was already moving towards the door. "But I shall also tell you quite frankly that if the suspicion of murder against you hardens into certainty, you cannot count on me as an escape accomplice." "No, I understand completely. If I were guilty, I wouldn't dare to hire someone like you," Quinn backtracked. "I can only implore you to do everything humanly possible to get me out of this hellhole." "But my dear Vice President," Dr. Watson addressed him, "apart from being locked up, you are being treated splendidly here, as we have just witnessed. A beautiful servant girl is merely waiting to serve your order and—" "Shush!" Quinn interrupted him, slapping his forehead repeatedly with the palm of his hand, which caused a smacking sound. "Can't you understand that they're subjecting me to the torments of Tantalus here? They sent me a beautiful, half-naked yet ice-cold woman." "Mr. Quinn, do you have any suspicion as to who put you in this situation?" inquired Holmes. "Yes, I do." Quinn quickly stood up, hurried over to the perplexed detective and whispered, "The governor, that vain patron, wants to destroy me, so he can crown himself vice president." I understand. Do not worry. We shall do our best for you," Holmes promised him and left with Dr. Watson, whereupon the door slammed shut behind them. "He has already been afflicted by paranoia," muttered Dr. Watson. "Have you noticed it too, Watson?" Holmes inquired. "This Quinn seems to be rather forward with the ladies." "One could certainly say that. What would his newly wedded wife say about that?" The doctor posed a rhetorical question. "From this one can deduce," Holmes concluded, "that he has fallen victim to an intrigue due to his rather forward manner. The only question is, by whom? The governor, as he assumes, or his wife, who surely would not look kindly upon such behaviour. The investigation will certainly not be an easy undertaking," sensed Dr. Watson. "We should look for a hotel. The night robot can surely recommend one to us. I shall ask him," Holmes resolved. But at the exit now stood a human, specifically a muscular bearded fellow of 6 feet and 6 inches in height, wearing martial attire with a red cloak. "Oh ho! The Galactic Union has caught wind of their second chieftain's activities after all," he sneered from afar. "And the visitors have even thrown on 19th century suits. Bravo! Today I am portraying a gladiator, ready for combat. Would you both like to take me on at once?" "Are you the prison governor?" asked Holmes, without responding to the provocation. "I am the security officer of Trappist City, Megalord Medius," he introduced himself whilst flexing his muscles. "And I am to inform you to not trouble the governor again until tomorrow." "Yes, we had no intention of troubling him again," Holmes assured him. "Could you recommend a good hotel to us, Mr. Megalord?" "A car will take you to the Trappist 5 Seasons. Make yourself at home," he said, with a smug smile on his thick lips beneath a broken nose, and pointed his thumb outside, where a street cruiser from Earth's 1970s was already invitingly opening its doors. "Welcome to the 1973 Lincoln Continental Mark IV. A husky female voice greeted them as soon as they got in. "My name is Sandra, and I'll take you to your hotel. Do you have any particular music requests, gentlemen?" "Yes, I would love to hear Spring by Debussy," Holmes commanded, whereupon the desired symphony immediately sounded from the car radio. "Ah, what a delightful melody you have chosen there, dear friend," praised Dr. Watson. The car stopped just in time for the end of Claude Debussy's piece in front of a 5-story building, where a red carpet was laid out before its glass doors. Inside, a charming receptionist awaited guests and handed the 2 Englishmen the key to suite number 18 on the first floor, which was reached by a paternoster lift. "They have very peculiar moving rooms here," Holmes objected. But this continuous passenger lift was actually patented by our fellow countryman Peter Hart back in 1877, Dr. Watson recalled. Yes, I know, but I would never have expected to find it here on Trappist 1E, announced the master detective. Here, they have apparently found joy in gathering bits and pieces from all epochs, and the inhabitants love to dress up in costumes. "It seems to me as though they are trying to lead us astray here," Dr. Watson suspected. "Let them try all they want. They certainly won't be able to fool a Sherlock Holmes," he was certain. After a restful night in the comfortable hotel room, both set off again in their talking vehicle to visit the governor, who was sitting in the garden at the breakfast table, relishing fragrant coffee and offering his visitors a seat, but nothing else. "Dr. Watson and I have already been able to form an impression of your city," Holmes began with casual conversation. "Indeed, very friendly people in colourful garments, Mr. Wellington." "Yes, here we make the extraordinary seem ordinary," boasted the governor, wearing an outfit today as if copied from Louis XIV. "Has the Vice President complained about me?" "No," Holmes lied as best he could. He said he had been drugged through his drink and then innocently woke up next to a male corpse. He, Wellington whinnied. "That's a good one. Now I shall reveal the facts to you, Mr. Holmes. Quinn bludgeoned his wife's masseur to death with an empty vodka bottle, despite him being a eunuch, so jealousy might have been the motive." "While that is possible, jealousy also exists between siblings," Dr. Watson pointed out, "and usually it remains limited to minor hostilities." "Whatever," Wellington dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Of course, it is unacceptable for someone to receive special treatment in court merely because he happens to be Vice President of the Union, and for us to let him get away with murder, especially since his fingerprints were the only ones found on the entire bottle. The only concession I would make would be a letter of resignation, so that afterwards he could serve his sentence here in complete secrecy without public attention and scandal." "The notion that he might be innocent has not yet occurred to you, Mr. Wellington?" Holmes wondered. "Precisely," Dr. Watson chimed in. "As far as I know, he has not yet been convicted. It's only a matter of time. The indictment, as far as I know, is nearly complete. The honourable gentleman is an erotomaniac and murdered a rival, or rather, someone he thought was a rival, for the designation eunuch wasn't tattooed on his forehead." As Wellington spoke thus, he kept rubbing his hands as if he were cold. "The whole story sounds rather contrived, Mr. Wellington," Holmes chided him. "From which side was the secrecy actually demanded?" "From the suspect's wife, of course," the governor responded spontaneously. "She demanded absolute discretion in this delicate matter. She was visibly embarrassed to be married to such a man. My impression of her was that of a disappointed wife, and that from the very beginning of the marriage. But you'd best ask her yourself. She's still staying at the Trappist Desert Inn. And do enjoy the feeling of being alive." On the journey there, Dr. Watson ordered the Well-Tempered Clavier by Johann Sebastian Bach. The Trappist Desert Inn presented itself entirely in the style of a 20th century Californian motel, with car parks and a swimming pool in the shape of a guitar. There they found the newly wedded Mrs. Quinn, a shapely blonde in a snow-white bikini, lounging in a deck chair under a parasol, with a cocktail glass in her right hand and a Chihuahua puppy in her left. When asked about the matter, she still appeared shaken. "What happened to my husband? It is—" She shook her curly head, broke off, gasped for air, and clearly struggled to find the right words. "It is dreadful, even though he wasn't the murderer. It is dreadful, because it merely appeared as though he could have been. As a politician, this has brought him to the end of his career." "I shall not presume to pass judgment on that matter, Lady Quinn," Holmes informed her. "I see my task primarily as solving a murder case, and I would do so even if the suspect were not the Vice President of the Union." "You are an upright man with a strong sense of justice," she praised him. "That is rare to find." "Yes," he confirmed to her, "the unwavering code of chivalry, fearlessness, and self-sacrifice is what defines the true gentleman." She nodded approvingly. "Yet, even if my husband's innocence should crystallize, his life will never be the same afterwards." "May I ask whether you have already engaged a solicitor, Lady Quinn?" Dr. Watson interjected into the conversation. "A solicitor?" she repeated, bewildered. "Then everyone in the entire galaxy would soon know about it. My husband is powerful enough to handle the matter on his own." Before Holmes could advise her on the matter, a deeply tanned giant appeared in yellow swimming trunks, whose black tattoos of skulls and vultures further emphasized his sinister appearance. Time for your massage, Mrs. Quinn, he whispered, winked at her with one eye and turned to leave. Wonderful, Lucky, she breathed, rose, set down her glass and little dog, and ran after him without a word of farewell. Oh ho, said Dr. Watson, stroking his moustache. The lady appears to have found comfort already. Yes, and the dog isn't real, Holmes observed. It's merely standing there decoratively, without panting or moving. Real dogs are probably forbidden here, the doctor surmised, and picked up the glass to sniff it. This is a whiskey cocktail. He took a furtive sip. Phew, that's a strong drink, just as strong as her new admirer. I thought the same. Come along, Watson, Holmes urged him. We shall pay number 587-298 another visit. Half an hour later, they found themselves back in the cell of the Vice President, who appeared to be visibly deteriorating under the burden of his imprisonment. Ah, I am but a shadow of my former self, a victim of Wellington. This operetta governor is determined to give his city a touch of the wider world. A convicted vice president fits perfectly into his concept. He worked himself up, looking alternately at Holmes and Dr. Watson. Do you know what I believe, gentlemen? He's impotent and envious of my virility. We are men, aren't we? Real men. And he's nothing but a fat pig. And this megalord, he looks like a mentally deficient creature conceived whilst drunk. No, compared to them, we are magnificent specimens with natural needs. We simply love it when ladies fall at our feet. No human impulse is foreign to us. How can we help it if women chase after us? And anyway, Sherlock Holmes interrupted his flow of speech. Pardon me, Mr. Quinn. I know that as a politician you are accustomed to speaking at length, but let us focus on the essentials. Mr. Wellington suspects jealousy as your motive. Jealousy? The governor could not comprehend. I do not even know what that is, and even if it were so, does he truly believe that I would have dirtied my own hands? I, as vice president, would only need to snap my fingers and a mercenary army would be at my disposal. He snapped his fingers demonstratively, whereupon the servant girl reappeared and waited for his order. Ah yes, what would you distinguished visitors like to drink today? He inquired, overly friendly, knowing that he was dependent on them. The beer actually tasted quite good to me yesterday, recalled Dr. Watson. 3 beers then, Quinn ordered whilst holding up 3 splayed fingers and continued. That I would personally dispose of someone. That disgusting fat slob doesn't even believe that himself. No, he wants to destroy me, and then… Now he broke off, but the serving girl delivered, as she had yesterday, 3 full tankards of foaming beer and quickly withdrew again. What we need is either an alibi witness or another suspect, Holmes declared after a hearty swig of beer. There are no witnesses, Quinn was certain. And even if there were, that revolting fat slob would have already silenced them all. I'm afraid we'll have to think of something else to manoeuvre me out of this wretched mess. What if I were to fake my death using certain substances, pufferfish toxin for example, and then as a merely sedated corpse get out of here? No, I strongly advise against that, Dr. Watson interrupted. Just imagine if they were to perform an autopsy on you as a seemingly dead person, Mr. Quinn. Frightful! Quinn exclaimed and drained his tankard, then laid his arm jovially around Holmes's shoulder. I'm counting on you. You strike me as a very intelligent fellow. Now Dr. Watson became rather offended, as this sentence implied that Quinn did not consider him to be quite as intelligent. Therefore, he felt compelled to ask the Vice President a delicate question. Might it not perhaps be possible that it was indeed you, Mr. Quinn, who in some state of diminished responsibility… No, he immediately interrupted. I have no recollection of any murder. I couldn't possibly be drunk enough to commit a murder myself. If you say so, whispered the doctor, piqued. Ah, my wife could come and visit me sometime as well. After all, Our body part south of the navel needs to stay active. Wouldn't you agree, gentlemen? Talk to her and convince her of my innocence." With that, he patted the detective encouragingly on the shoulder, then even pulled him a bit closer. "We shall do our utmost," promised Holmes with a raised eyebrow, straightening himself up and already heading towards the door. "Furthermore," demanded the Vice President, "you and your friend must make the impossible possible. We men must stick together. If you don't get me out of here, this fat blob will wallow in his invincibility." Just as yesterday, the door slammed shut again after the visitors had withdrawn and marched towards the exit. "The way he always says we and us, implying that all men are as immoral as he is," grumbled Dr. Watson. "He apparently lives solely for reproduction, particularly for the movements one must perform to achieve it." "He is a potent man, but not a murderer," stated Holmes. "He simply lacks the energy for that, which, as you correctly observed, he prefers to expend amongst the ladies. Something has occurred to me. What if the cause of death wasn't the blow with the bottle at all?" Dr. Watson eagerly completed the sentence. Yes, if the victim had already been placed there dead, then Quinn would merely be a sacrificial pawn, just as he suspects. "We must return to the governor so that he may grant you permission for a thorough examination of the body," declared Holmes, already hurrying out of the gloomy prison with great anticipation. "Before we visit him again, we should first go to the prisoner's wife to encourage her to pay him a visit," suggested the doctor. "I fear he might waste away without his beloved before you come up with something, my dear friend." Upon entering the Lincoln, Holmes agreed and requested Beethoven's Ninth Symphony as musical accompaniment for the drive to their hotel. Intoxicated by the music, the Englishman stepped out at the Trappist Desert Inn and once again found the sophisticated Mrs. Quinn lounging by the swimming pool. This time, she was sprawling provocatively on the deck chair in a bright yellow swimming costume without a cocktail, but again with the artificial little dog in her hand, which apparently represented her favourite accessory. "Pardon me, Lady Quinn, if we disturb you yet again, but your husband yearns for you," Holmes sweet-talked her. "Indeed, I would almost say he is consumed with longing for you and your beauty." "Really?" she replied with amusement, baring her pearly white teeth. "Yes, he expects the fulfilment of conjugal love," explained Dr. Watson, who turned slightly red while saying it. Irritated, she dropped the little dog and made a defensive gesture before snapping. "There are no conjugal duties in prison, even if that would be possible for him as vice president. Tell him that." "He won't want to hear that," Holmes surmised quietly. "That only concerns me peripherally," she continued, picking up the small dog again. "He should get that wish out of his head. Remind him that we could potentially be filmed by a hidden camera or a robot that suddenly appears. One can never be certain of not being caught by a lens." "Ah, I see," escaped from the detective's lips as he rubbed his chin with his thumb. "I hadn't thought of that at all." "Yes, I can well believe that," she said tartly. "And he hasn't thought of it either. Professionally, he leaves the thinking to others, to the president, for example. As his vice, he doesn't need to do much thinking work. I believe he is under-challenged, and now, after this embarrassing affair, completely finished." "In that case, I apologise for having troubled you, Lady Quinn," Holmes muttered with a bow, before turning on his heel and hastily rushing back to the car. "What are you up to, Holmes?" panted Dr. Watson, who could barely keep pace with him. "First, I envision a visit to the governor, where we shall offer your services for the post-mortem examination of the victim's body, and afterwards a visit to the bar which was the scene of the crime," explained the master detective, whose grey cells had truly come alive after the conversation with the lady. The gentleman met the governor, who today wore a midnight blue tailcoat with an emerald green sash, dining in front of his villa. Once again, he sat in his well-maintained garden and dined at a lavishly set table. And once again, he offered them only a seat, neither food nor drink. "So then," he mumbled with his mouth full, "your friend is a doctor and—" "Military doctor?" interrupted Dr. Watson with a solemn expression. Munch, military doctor, whatever you say, and wants to examine the dead man thoroughly, does he?" As he spoke, a morsel of food dangled from the corner of his mouth, which looked rather unsavoury, as did his manner of shoving roasted chicken pieces into his throat with his fingers. "Yes, do you have any objections to that, Mr. Wellington?" inquired Holmes, pointing his index finger at him. Munch, I suppose. He could do that for all I care, but—" At this point he interrupted himself to lick his fingers. Observing this bad habit, Holmes could not resist needling him. There exists a small three-pronged implement for poking at food, commonly known as a fork. "Ha, ha!" laughed the governor, his large belly rising and falling. "Why make things complicated when they can be simple? To return to your request regarding the examination, it is merely the case that the unfortunate eunuch has already been cremated." After this revelation, he delicately dabbed his mouth with a napkin. "But the trial hasn't even begun yet. You yourself said the indictment wasn't even ready," the doctor remarked in astonishment. Wellington took a slurping sip from a glass of red wine and belched. "Burp! Pardon me. Yes, it's taking longer because, considering the perpetrator's high office, we cannot afford to make even the smallest mistake. But the sad affair happened 2 weeks ago, so unfortunately it became high time to lay the soulless body to eternal rest. During his lifetime, his wish was that after his death, regardless of how it might occur, he should be swiftly committed to the flames. You see, there's a religion here called Phoenix. Have the fine gentlemen ever heard of it?" The Englishmen looked at each other in astonishment and shook their heads. The governor could not suppress a smirk. "But surely you know the legend of the phoenix rising from the ashes. Here, a religious founder named Alistair Ashwell used this to gather a legion of followers who throw their good money at him during their lifetime, so that afterwards, after their death and cremation, they might someday rise again from the ashes. And the body must be committed to the flames no later than 1 week after death. It's a matter of faith, against which all reason is powerless. Well, tough luck, but as I already told you, the facts are so clear that an examination by you, military doctor, would not have yielded any different results." With a facial expression that, mildly put, resembled that of a corpulent troll, the governor leant back in his chair expectantly. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson rose silently, bowed briefly and departed, followed by Wellington's amused glances as he contentedly rubbed his fat belly. "What do you make of it, Holmes?" asked Dr. Watson, who had taken his seat dejectedly in the Lincoln. "Quinn's fate appears to be sealed," replied Holmes with an exhale. "But at least we still have one attempt to get to the bottom of this matter." "Do you actually believe in a miracle?" inquired the doctor. "Miracles do happen sometimes. Indeed, I believe that those who feel too secure easily overlook what is essential. But first, let us drive to our hotel and likewise partake in a hearty meal." On the way there, the smart limousine played the song Rule Britannia at the request of the two Englishmen. At the Trappist Five Seasons, they leisurely dined on roasted chicken and drank white wine. After dessert, they philosophised about religion and the hardships that the faithful had to endure. Suddenly, they saw plumes of smoke rising in the distance. "There appears to be a fire over there. Quickly, Watson, perhaps we can help," called Holmes as he made his way with him to their musical vehicle. "Quickly towards the blaze, Saundra. We must contain the flames." "My sensors indicate that smoke is rising from the entertainment district," Saundra informed them as she sped off. "I also have a fire extinguisher in the boot." "That is good to know," Holmes said with delight. "And a first aid kit is also on board," reported the intelligent vehicle in a smoky voice. "This is something for me." Dr. Watson clenched his fists as if already declaring battle with the Grim Reaper by telephone. "I hope we can save many people." In a wild chase after the fire, they sped along the wide road, with scattered palm trees lining its sides. The central star high on the horizon swelled, in a true explosion of colours from yellow and orange to reddish hues. A distant rumbling and roaring underscored the growing mushroom cloud of smoke which in its soot-blackened form threatened to devour the red dwarf in the sky. As they drew closer, Holmes and the doctor saw several wooden houses and temple-like stone buildings ablaze. Before them stood a cluster of people in Roman togas, all wringing their hands in sheer desperation. The Lincoln stopped and opened its doors. Holmes and Dr. Watson jumped out, retrieved the fire extinguisher and the car's first aid kit from the boot, and hurried towards the agitated crowd, which consisted of women, children, and men in flowing, predominantly white garments. "What has happened?" asked the detective, who could not detect the slightest attempt by the crowd to extinguish the fire, whilst already holding the fire extinguisher at the ready, prepared to dispense the firefighting foam. "I am a doctor!" exclaimed Dr. Watson, looking from one to another, whilst raising the first aid kit in a sort of triumphant gesture. "Is anyone injured?" "Ha ha!" laughed one of the men, whilst draping his toga in an affected gesture. "Your concern for us is very well acted indeed, but you are wearing entirely the wrong costumes. We are merely reenacting the burning of Rome following Emperor Nero's violin performance." At these words, both men froze like pillars of salt, though Holmes quickly found his voice again. "You are amusing yourselves with a deliberately set fire, and with your children present, no less." "Ha ha, yes indeed. What could be lovelier than a little fire from which one need not flee? Like a living creature, it devours its way through our specially constructed city, whilst we enjoy a splendid holiday atmosphere," explained a lady who had adorned herself like the goddess Fortuna with a cornucopia. Suddenly, Megalord appeared in his gladiator costume. "Well, who do we have here? The Vice President's favourites." "Have you arranged all of this?" Dr. Watson wanted to know, as he perplexedly lowered his first aid kit. "Indeed. I'm not only the safety officer of this beautiful and most illustrious city, but, and now you'll be even more amazed, I'm also the holiday entertainment coordinator, all in one person. The adventure-seeking people who come to us want to experience something they unfortunately must do without elsewhere. Whether they're on their honeymoon or already on their divorce holiday, the merry city burning, all been done before, still enjoys the greatest popularity, except among certain uptight squares who have to go down to the cellar to laugh." During his little speech, he looked down condescendingly at the indignant gentleman. "You're a most unpleasant person," Holmes stated bluntly. "Unfortunately, far from the only one." "Ha ha ha!" Megalord burst into raucous laughter. "No one has ever dared to say that to my face before." "Ah, is that a face?" Holmes sneered. "We thought it was a mask," Dr. Watson added, piling on. "Ha ha ha!" the security entertainer roared with laughter. "You two peculiar fragments amuse me." "Do you light a fire every day?" inquired Holmes. "For the visitors' enjoyment?" "Almost every day. Sometimes I also reenact the Battle of Pearl Harbor, which took place in 1941. It's quite a success too," he revealed proudly. "You plan an entire battle, just like that?" The doctor could not comprehend. "Yes. Besides, military equipment has traditionally been rather discreet," Megalord sneered. "Megalord! Megalord!" chanted the mob. "I shall continue laughing later, but first I must catch the evil Nero and tear him apart in mid-air. Do not worry, he is merely a humanoid robot, but he can bleed, and that is what the masses want to see. How one bleeds as punishment for his crimes. And soon that will be your vice president. Ha ha ha! He will then be merely a joke president. Too funny, isn't it? Ha ha ha!" As soon as he had departed, Holmes turned away from the entire scene and walked silently back to the Lincoln. Slowly but surely, I'm starting to prefer such a lifeless carriage without horses to all of humanity, muttered Dr. Watson, disturbed. More and more, it becomes clear to me that we fit in here as much as a bird belongs in an aquarium. Holmes compared their situation. Nevertheless, we must complete our mission. We would like to hear Mozart's Requiem in D minor, Sondra. A short while later, they arrived back at their hotel. Time flew by, and as dusk set in, they drove back to the Trappist Desert Inn, not to interrogate Lady Quinn again, but rather to visit the hotel bar where a murder had occurred 2 weeks ago. The bar presented itself in the style of a disreputable establishment with dim lighting, a long counter where numerous stools awaited guests, an elderly barkeeper with rolled-up sleeves who was eagerly polishing glasses, and a small stage where a band was playing. The blonde singer wore platform boots, black leather gear, and tossed his long hair back and forth whilst moving like an electric eel to loud guitar sounds, bellowing his heart out. "Good heavens!" exclaimed Dr. Watson. "The poor fellow has suffered an electric shock." "No," the barkeeper interjected. "That's rock music from the 20th century." "I would have called that hellish noise," remarked Holmes, casually taking a seat on a bar stool. Since the doctor was shorter than Holmes, he had to rather awkwardly hoist himself onto the adjacent stool, whilst the band's final bars faded away and the singer left the stage. "So, this is where it happened. I presume you wish to question the barkeeper now, Holmes." "My name is Sean. What would you like to drink?" inquired the latter, as if on cue. "I'll have a double whiskey," ordered Holmes. "Could you tell me what happened here 2 weeks ago?" 2 weeks ago, I was on holiday," Sean admitted whilst pouring him a glass of whiskey. "But I know what you're getting at. Word has it the Vice President killed someone here, though that happened just before closing time. The place was already dead quiet then." "Though perhaps not quite that dead," objected Dr. Watson. "I'll have a whiskey as well." "What do you mean by that?" Sean inquired curiously whilst pouring him a glass as well. "Well, as I heard it, there was still some activity here. At least the Vice President and that poor eunuch were present." "And a witness who screamed bloody murder," Holmes recalled. "Yes, quite," Sean admitted. "But otherwise, dead as a doornail, as we say here." "Are there any hidden cameras here, Sean?" Holmes wanted to know from him. "What are you thinking?" he exclaimed indignantly. "There's strict privacy here. Where would we be if everyone who gets plastered here were to be filmed, eh?" No sooner had he left than the doctor downed his glass in one. "Hiccup! Things are looking rather grim for the powerful politician." "Well, I must think," pondered Holmes while stroking his lofty intellectual brow. "Let's simply remain seated here and study the local atmosphere. Thankfully, heavenly peace has now descended." So they sat there for 2 or 3 hours, watching various guests come, drink, chat, and leave again. Neither Quinn's pretty wife nor her sinister masseur showed their faces, which somewhat puzzled the Englishman, though they could piece together that the two preferred the seclusion from the public for certain reasons. In short, nothing serious happened. None of the guests with whom they exchanged a few words knew about the murder case. The barkeeper kept an eye on them, coming over now and then to refill their glasses, from which they merely sipped to keep a clear head. Finally, Holmes paid with his smart bracelet, and they were about to leave when a visibly drunk man came into the bar, positioned himself at the end of the counter, and loudly bellowed his drink order. "Vodka!" He held on with one hand while straightening his somewhat dishevelled suit with the other. Sean poured a full glass and slid it energetically towards the new guest, but due to his blood alcohol level and the resulting delayed reaction, he missed it, whereupon it fell to the floor with a crash and shattered. And no sooner had the tinkling sound faded than a small, inconspicuous robot, 1 metre in height, emerged from a corner and immediately rolled towards the shards. With its extendable metal hands, it shoveled them into its anthracite-coloured body, turning its head back and forth searchingly with its large eyes to ensure it didn't miss a single shard. The drunkard staggered towards the barkeeper, and Holmes stood rooted to the spot before the robot. "Can you speak, little robot?" he inquired. "Yes, indeed, sir. I am Service Robot X-15. What can I do for you? Would you like me to polish your shoes?" "No, I need some information. Do you have a hidden camera installed, X-15? "Of course, sir. Otherwise, I would not be able to carry out my work. Whenever something falls to the ground, my camera eyes switch on automatically. Then I must determine whether it is broken and decide if it needs to be removed." Hopefully, Holmes looked at Dr. Watson. If we're lucky, he filmed the entire incident. After all, a body fell to the ground when he was struck with a vodka bottle. We might be able to see by whom. That would be Quinn's salvation, the doctor hoped as well. Holmes questioned X-15 again. "Did you film a man falling to the ground a fortnight ago?" "One moment, please. I am scanning my hard drive. Yes, I filmed a man who fell to the ground. I do not need to help humans up. Would you like me to play it back, sir?" "Oh yes, if that's possible," rejoiced the master detective, staring intently at the small robot. "It is possible," it announced, and projected a hologram between Holmes and the doctor with its camera eyes. In it, a man in oriental dress could be seen lying on the ground. Just behind him, the vice president sat on a bar stool, his head and both arms resting on the counter, clearly unconscious from too much alcohol, with an empty bottle of vodka within reach. "Oh, that's the eunuch," whispered Dr. Watson excitedly, pointing at the man lying down. The eunuch propped himself up on his elbows, tried to stand up again, but stumbled, clutched his chest with one hand, attempted to speak, but only managed a rasp before his head fell back to the ground with a dull thud. "The man has suffered a heart attack," diagnosed Dr. Watson. "Yes, that is crystal clear, even to a layman," Holmes agreed. Now the vice president began to stir, drowsily raising his head, attempting to prop up his upper body, and in doing so clumsily knocked the vodka bottle off the counter with his arm, which landed directly on the eunuch's head. In his attempt to climb down from the bar stool, he fell beside the victim and also lay motionless. After 3 seconds, another man in a black domino mask joined them, looked down in horror at the two bodies lying before him and bellowed, "Scandal! The vice president has committed murder!" After that, the hologram disappeared, for X-15 had decided not to pick up the vodka bottle, which had not broken, remained in his corner, and ended the recording. "Ah, this is conclusive proof that it was not murder at all, but rather a rather silly accident," Sherlock Holmes exclaimed. "We must confiscate this marvellous robot to ensure nothing happens to it, and so we can show the recording to Mr. Wellington," Dr. Watson rattled off excitedly. "What do you think the governor will do when he sees it?" "No difficulties, though he certainly won't be pleased," Holmes speculated, because from what I gather, he was rather looking forward to the conviction of his adversary. But we shall simply summon him here with my smart bracelet and present him with the facts. "That is an excellent idea," praised the doctor. "We shall invite him for a surprise drink." Indeed, the governor accepted the invitation and, driven by his curiosity, arrived at the bar merely half an hour later, watched the hologram, whereupon his mood visibly plummeted to rock bottom. Well, no eccentric journalist could have dreamt up something like this for a report," he remarked with a sour smile around his mouth, which he would have rather occupied with fine dining. "And no crime novel author either," the doctor added. "Reality truly writes the most incredible stories. But now you will hopefully order the immediate release of the Vice President, will you not, Mr. Wellington?" "What else can I do?" he conceded with a shrug of his shoulders, which was visibly uncomfortable for him, and called the prison using his smart bracelet before feeling sorry for himself. That such a faux pas had to happen to me of all people. Let's have a sip of something strong, as I could really use that right now." And so it came to pass that 15 minutes later, the Vice President, dressed in his private attire, a black suit, was escorted to the bar by the megalord, who this time had disguised himself as a soldier. "Thank God," he exclaimed when he learned of Sherlock Holmes's explanation and regained some colour in his face. "I shall depart at once. Come along. Take me to the spaceship this very instant, gentlemen." But Mr. Quinn, would you not rather first visit your wife to—" Dr. Watson could not continue speaking, as Quinn interrupted him. "Oh, she can follow later. The main thing is that I can leave this planet as quickly as possible," he urged them to depart. "Are you leaving us already, dear Mr. Vice President?" Wellington imitated a regretful tone in his voice. "Yes," Quinn snapped at him. "I would never have credited you with such quick comprehension, Governor." "I do hope I can welcome you here again soon, dearest Vice President." Wellington grovelled subserviently. "Perhaps during your next holiday?" "If one considers the neglect of the body in your prison as a holiday, then your city is exactly the right destination for it. My visit has ennobled your pathetic little dump, but I shall deny you the extraordinary pleasure of welcoming me here again. No, you'll never see me here again, Wellington. I shall tear the entire planet from my travel atlas and wouldn't even want to have a picture of me hanging here." "Exit!" he finally commanded in a loud voice and strode energetically out of the bar. "Ahem," Wellington cleared his throat. "I cannot help but feel that he did not quite enjoy himself here with us." "Farewell, Governor," Holmes said goodbye with a quick wink. "I fear you haven't found a regular customer for your entertainment society in the Vice President." You were listening to S. Pomej, The Suspicious Vice President, Sherlock Holmes, The Galactic Cases, Episode 13. Based on the characters by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. A Go Audio production.